So we're going to talk about the Marian apparitions of the world, the approved ones from 1937 to 1992. And we'll start out in Germany in 1937 with Our Lady of Heed. So the people weren't listening to the messages of Fatima, which came before World War I. And so now we're getting close to World War II, and it's in its beginning stages. And Mary would begin appearing in Germany, where the Nazis were starting to take over. And in the apparitions of Lady of Heed, there were over 100 apparitions to a total of 4 girls, and she was titled Queen of the Universe. And these visionaries were entrusted with prophecies, solemn messages, secrets, and including one secret for the Pope. So the 4 girls went to church for All Saints' Day, and they suddenly see about 100 feet away a floating light above the ground in the cemetery. And this form transitions into a woman's silhouette. So they're kind of frightened, so they go into the church and they tell the people there that the Blessed Virgin had appeared to them with the baby Jesus in her arms. So they decide to go back to the cemetery, and the apparition remained silent. So all the girls saw the Virgin except for another girl, Adelie, who said, "Let's go back to the house or the church. I don't believe these stories." So Maria and Grete told their mother, and she alerted Father Stalberg, who was priest of the parish. And of course, the people of the village were skeptical and were amused at the girls and their imagination. It wasn't until they saw the girls with a dramatic change, where they switched from pleasures and amusements to long prayer, and they were waiting for the time when they would see the heavenly vision again. The next day, the lady appears without baby Jesus, and her hands clasped in prayer. And the information had got around, and so like 4,000 or 5,000 people showed up that surrounded the seers, and several priests witnesses the apparitions. There were several apparitions with crowds as many as 7,000 or more. Maria was alone at one of the apparitions, and she said, "I saw the Mother of God directly in front of me, 2 feet away from me, and asked her, 'How would you like to be invoked?' And she said, 'As Queen and Queen of the Holy Souls.' 'With what prayer would you like to be honored?' She said, 'In the Litany of Loreto.'" So here is the Litany of Loreto that you can download or get online or see and pray when you have a choice. And Loreto is where Mary's house is, that was transported by angels from Jerusalem. And it's over in Loreto, Italy, and it's housed inside a huge basilica where you can go and sit inside Mary's house. So the Gestapo put a stop to the superstitious nonsense and stuck the girls in a lunatic asylum. So after a few weeks, the girls were released, but they were forbidden to go to the apparitions. So they would mark stones where there were going to be an apparition so that people could come. In January 1940, the girls returned to the start of the apparitions. She gave them a secret intended for the Pope and said, "Do not say anything except to the Holy Pope of Rome." And it was given to the Pope in a sealed envelope. I haven't found out what it was. So Greta, one of the 4 girls, received the stigmata in 1939, a couple of years after the apparitions start. And after 3 years, the apparitions start. She gave a secret to each child and then added, "Now, my dear girls, remain good and faithful to the will of God. Pray often and willingly. Pray the rosary. Now I'm going to heaven." And there was many cures that occurred, and the parish priests and other clergy began supporting the seers. So we'll go to Spain for Our Lady of Sorrows. In May 1945, Marcelina Exposito Barroso and Agustina Gonzalez were walking to the next village of Marco near Codosera. And when they crossed the place called Chandabila, she noticed a dark shape a couple hundred feet away to the right of the road. She saw Our Lady wrapped in luminous rays with a black cloak embroidered with stars. And but she was sad. After the vision vanished, she ran to the village. 2 days later, at a second apparition, Marcelina was asked to make a penance by Mary by crawling on the ground 100 feet to the chestnut tree where Mary was appearing. She told her not to be afraid, even though the ground was rocky, that she would protect her. Marcelina's mom was very worried, but after she got to Mary, they could see that she was not cut or bruised or anything. She told Marcelina that she would like a chapel built on that spot, which later was done. So more pilgrims began coming to the site. One of them was Afra Brigade, who also was able to see the Virgin Mary. She told Afra she would have to suffer much, and later Afra received the stigmata, the wounds on her hands and feet. So Afra and Marcelina and some other people were visiting the shrine of Our Lady of the Incarnation. And when she was doing the Stations of the Cross, she entered into ecstasy at the 11th station. She saw the plight of our Lord Jesus Christ in his crucifixion, and she felt a sharp pain on her palms. There were a few sores, cuts, and wounds in the side, dripping blood, causing her excruciating pain. And then finally, the marks on her feet. So the blood flowed mainly on Fridays. She was subjected to examinations, and a doctor tried to cure her, but they couldn't close the wounds. So Marcelina became a religious in the congregation of the Sisters of the Cross. And a beautiful church was built that even enveloped the chestnut tree where they first saw the apparition. And the Bishop of Badavos approved the apparitions. And there's the shrine in Coto Serra. Then we go to France in 1947, Our Lady of the Prayer. So December 8th, Feast of the Immaculate Conception. 4 girls went to the St. Giles Church to pray for France. So France was in the middle of almost a civil war between the supporters of Charles de Gaulle and supporters of communism. And a light appeared, which they saw Our Lady whose hands were joined in prayer, and she had rosary beads draped over her right arm. And an angel was kneeling next to her, and he was holding a flower in his hand. Eventually, the apparition disappeared into like a cloud of silvery dust. Later that same afternoon, the girls decided to go back and to start praying again. The lady and the angels were waiting for them, and she had a beautiful smile. She said, "Tell the children to pray for France, for her need is great." Then Jacqueline asked about the angel, and he said, "I am the Archangel Gabriel." So the lady asked them to return later that afternoon at 5 and again the next day at 1. So here's the inside of the church, and you can see off to the left where they made the grotto with Mary and Archangel. Anyway, so 5 p.m. the girls were back in the church and began to pray the rosary. Mary appeared to them and had a beautiful smile. The next day in the morning, she asked the girls to kiss the cross of my rosary. So the girls who were tall enough would kiss the cross, and then Jacqueline had to hold up a couple of the little girls that weren't tall enough. Was extraordinary because she was very frail and sickly. After the apparition ended, Jacqueline tried to lift the girls, but she wasn't able to. So Our Lady said again, "Pray for France, which in these days is in great danger." And then she said, "Tell the priest to build a grotto as soon as possible here where I am, and to put my statue and that of the angel in it." And she said, "Come every day at 1, I will tell you when it will be all over." So that day, the communists called off the general strike, which would have paralyzed all of France, and went back to work. and the hostility between the French, the people supporting Charles de Gaulle, and the communists faded away. And the Archbishop said that it was all a miracle. On the 10th of December, Jacqueline asked the Virgin for a miracle. She said, "I haven't come here to perform miracles, but to tell you to pray for France. But tomorrow you will see clearly and you will not need to wear your glasses." So when Jacqueline woke up the next morning, she could see clearly without her glasses. On the 14th, Mary appeared and asked the girls to sing Hail Mary, and Jacqueline thanked Mary for curing her sight. And that was the 14th, was the last time. And Our Lady asked if they would pray and make sacrifices and to continue to pray the rosary. And Jacqueline again asked for proof of her presence. So Mary left a ray of sunlight which penetrated the church through a pane in the window of the choir way up high. And the light grew progressively stronger and curved around up to the northeast side of the church, fanning out. And it ended up exactly where the girls had been looking. And that's where it became stronger and stronger. And that's where they put the grotto with Mary and the angel. And looking at it, the sun was not moving in that direction, and it wasn't really shining in that window. So it wasn't just a natural flow of the sunlight. So then we go to Egypt in 1968 with Our Lady of Zeitoun. So April 68, a bus mechanic was working across the street from the St. Mary Coptic Church in Zeitoun in the district of Cairo, Egypt. And the Coptic Church are like an Orthodox church. They're not affiliated with the Catholic Church, affiliated with the Orthodox churches. It's believed to be one of the locations where the Holy Family stayed during their flight to Egypt. And suddenly he saw on the roof a figure that appeared to be a young woman. So he pointed it out to a few people who also saw that figure. And he was worried that someone was about ready to commit suicide to jump off the church. So they called the local police. So a crowd gathered to watch this spectacle. And after a few minutes, the figure vanished. Over the next few days, everybody was talking about it. What was it? Where did she go? And the police said it was just some light reflecting in a weird way from a street light off a window or something. So on April 9th, the figure appeared again. And for the first time, she was stuck around for a few minutes before disappearing. And it started to dawn on people that what's going on. It was the Blessed Virgin Mary. So Farouk saw the apparition. He had a gangrenous finger that was about to be amputated the next day. And the finger was healed as he gazed at the image. She started appearing more frequently, sometimes staying around for hours at a time. And she sometimes appeared to be bowing toward the cross of the church or blessing those watching on the streets. And sometimes there appeared to be around her what looked to be like doves of light. So there were huge crowds that flocked to see her. Church officials, government officials, even President of Egypt, President Nasser, visited the site and saw the apparition. TV crews captured it on film, newspapers took pictures, and the police did another thorough investigation. They even turned off all the lights in the area to make sure it wasn't some type of reflection. And of course, turning off all the lights didn't make any difference. She was still appearing. They could find no natural or human explanation for the light. Soon the head of the Coptic Orthodox Church of Alexandria, Pope Kyrillius VI, launched an investigation. So the Orthodox Church has popes in different areas: Alexandria, Jerusalem, Istanbul, or say even Ukraine, Russia, so forth. So they have popes here and there, but they do consider the popes equal to them. but not above him. So at the same time, a group of Catholic nuns saw the apparition. They sent a report to the Vatican, and they sent a team to investigate, who also saw the apparition. But because the apparition was on a Coptic church, Orthodox church, they decided to let the Coptic church officials make a ruling, and which they did on May 5th, 1968. They said the apparition was real. The Egyptian government did investigations and accepted the apparitions to be real. The apparition was witnessed by hundreds of thousands and millions of people. As many as 250,000 people gathered to see. They had to close the street. They had to chop down trees, and even a garage was demolished, parking garage, to provide more space to view the apparition. Where the apparition was the Church of the Virgin Mary at Zeitoun. It was built by a Mr. Ibrahim back in 1925, and he built it as a miniature of the famous Hagia Sophia Church in Istanbul, Turkey. It was one of the largest churches in the world, but this was a model. And in a vision he had seen, which the Holy Virgin told him that she would appear at the church of Zeitoun after 40 years, which she did. And the church was consecrated during the Holy Mass on Sunday, June 1925. And I have a short video here. I'll give you a little bit of it. So then I want to bring in a little bit about Garabandal. It was not approved, but some of you are familiar with Garabandal and the messages that they had. And here's some information of why it wasn't approved, if you want to read all this. So let's go to Japan with Our Lady of Akita. And at Akita, first miraculous event was June 1973. And that was a month after Sister Agnes came into the convent, and she was a convert from Buddhism. And what she saw was a brilliant light shining from the tabernacle. It happened 7 times. And it was also accompanied sometimes by smoke, or let's say incense, which hung around the altar. And doing one of these illuminations, Sister Agnes saw a multitude of beings similar to angels who surrounded the altar in adoration before the host. Bishop Ito was staying at the convent, and St. Agnes confided in him the circumstances of this vision, as well as the events and apparitions that followed. And Bishop Ito and the spiritual director, Reverend Yusada, witnessed many of the events. St. Agnes was also favored with visitations of her guardian angel. The guardian angel confided various messages to the sister and prayed with her. On the evening of June 28th, Sister Agnes discovered in the palm of her hand a cross-shaped wound that was very painful. And then July 5th, a small opening appeared from which blood began to flow. And the pain would ease during most of the week, except for Thursday nights and all day Friday, when the pain would become unbearable. Then on July 6th, the guardian angel appeared, telling St. Agnes, the wounds of Mary are much deeper and more sorrowful than yours. Let us go to pray together in the chapel. And St. Agnes turned to the statue of Mary, and Mary appeared and said, your deafness will be healed. She then recited with St. Agnes the community prayer that had been composed by the bishop. And before she disappeared, she asked St. Agnes, Sister Agnes, to pray very much for the Pope, bishops, and priests. The next morning, the sisters found blood on the right hand of the statue, similar to what was on the hand of Sister Agnes. And the statue bled on Fridays of July during the year 73, as did the wound on the hand of Sister Agnes. On September 29th, the whole community saw a brilliant light coming from the statue. The entire body of the statue became covered with a moisture resembling perspiration. Her guardian angel told her, Mary is even sadder than when she shed blood. Dry the perspiration. The sisters used cotton balls to collect the moisture. Following Our Lady's message, the light that had surrounded the statue gradually disappeared. Then the statue began to weep and did so 3 times that day. The tears of December 8th, again on the Immaculate Conception, were filmed by a television crew and shown on television to about 12 million people throughout Japan. Sister Agnes was totally deaf when she entered the community, and her hearing was permanently restored on May 30th, 1982. Then we go to Venezuela, Our Lady of Betania. At 5 years old, Maria had a vision of St. Teresa of Lisieux, who gave her a rose. At 12 years old, Maria nears death from bronchial pneumonia and receives a vision of Mary that recommended the appropriate medications, which healed her. Then later, during adolescence, she was healed from a paralyzing illness after apparition of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. 1950, she visits Padre Pio, and he says, when I leave, Mary will be your consolation. And in 54, she enters a Franciscan convent for a brief period before being told that she did not have a vocation. So her vocation was to be married. So St. Teresa appears to her and tells her that she is to be a wife and a mother. She receives another vision that tells her to go to Rome, where she will meet her future husband. On December 8th, Maria marries Gio Briccani on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in St. Peter's during Advent. That has never been done before. Somehow, because typically during Advent and Lent, they don't do baptisms or marriages or whatever during that time. In 1974, Maria and Gio purchased a farm shown to her by Mary in a vision. And Mary said that it would be a center of constant prayer and pilgrimage for all the nations of the world. And in 76, there was the first apparition of Mary at the grotto site. Mary introduces herself as reconciler of people and nations. And in 1984, about 108 people saw the Virgin at the grotto as she first appears to the children at a waterfall that was next to the grotto, and then to the adults of the group at Mass. In 1987, Archbishop Pio Bello Riccardo approves the apparitions received by Maria. And in 1990, Mary appears for the last time. There was 31 appearances to Maria. And again, on the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, 1991, a Eucharistic miracle is reported, to which the host began to bleed. And tests in Caracas determined that the blood to be human. And there's been close to 100, over 100 Eucharistic miracles where the host is turned into flesh, or the host bled, or the wine is turned into blood. And every time they test them, it always is human blood and human flesh, and especially flesh from the pericardium, the muscles around the blood, around the heart. And it's also, I believe, also AB negative type blood. The message of Our Lady of Betania is reconciliation and love. Behold, children, the love of a mother who cherishes. and comes as a starting point to lead you toward the law of justice, love, peace, and reconciliation. And that is Maria with Stigmata. Then we go to Nicaragua, Our Lady of Cuapa. So since he was a little child, Bernardo Martinez had worked as a sacristan, cleaning the church and watching the linens for the parish in Cuapa, Nicaragua. And one evening, Bernardo went to ring the bell to alert the parish to pray the rosary, and he noticed a light glowing around the statue of Our Lady. He thought that it was coming from the outside. There was something, a hole letting in light, but when he got closer, he realized that the light was emanating from the statue itself. So on May 8th, later, he was on his way home when he saw flashes of lightning. Suddenly, a beautiful woman appeared to him floating on a cloud. She opened her arms and rays of light flowed forth. She said, "I come from heaven. I am the mother of Jesus." She told Bernardo she wanted people to pray the rosary every day at a set hour with no distractions. And if you're like me, you pray the rosary and you are distracted. I think even like Cardinal Newman and some other highly praised people agreed that they would have distractions when they were praying the rosary. She also encouraged the 5 first Saturdays devotion as she did in Panama. If people do not change, there will hasten the arrival of the Third World War. So if you haven't done the 5 first Saturdays, it's the first Saturday of the month for 5 months in a row. And you go to confession right before, right after the Saturday, and then you go to Mass Saturday morning and receive communion and say some prayers. And I think you say the rosary, and I think you meditate on the mysteries of the rosary for 15 minutes. But you can look it up on the internet and see exactly what you do. And when you do that, Mary says that she will make sure that there's a priest with you at your death so that you can receive the last rites and papal blessing that gets you straight into heaven. And on June 8th, Bernardo witnessed the history of the rosary unfold before him. He saw a procession of saints who he believed to be Dominicans. They were the ones that really promoted the rosary. And they were dressed in white and prayed the rosary while meditating on scripture. And in September, Our Lady appeared again in the sky, but this time she appeared as a very young girl. Bernardo told her that townspeople wanted to build a church in her honor, but she said the Lord does not necessarily want a material church. He wants living temples, which are yourselves. And in October 13th, which is the last day that Mary appeared at Panama, he received the final apparition of Our Lady. He said a lot of people don't believe in her. So Bernardo asked her for forgiveness. Our Lady encouraged him to pray the rosary. She told him that people should not just ask for peace, but they should strive to make it for themselves. Mary also implored Bernardo to accept the suffering in the world and ask for strength to carry the crosses. She said, "I'm not going to be here appearing to you, but I'll always with you. I'm the mother of all." So then we go to Medjugorje in 1981. And I have a full set of slides on this that I will go over in the next few weeks on Medjugorje because I've been there. I have a lot to talk about Medjugorje and also Our Lady of Coromato, which is in Venezuela. So I'll do those 2 presentations and they'll be longer presentations. But also in 1981, we have Our Lady of Sorrows in Rwanda. So vandalism was rampant all over the country. Statues of the Virgin Mary were mutilated, destroyed, or stolen. And Mary was almost forgotten and barely prayed to. Even the priests were believing the propaganda by theologians who tried to make them believe that devotion of the rosary was out of date. And at this time of discouragement, Mary chose to visit Rwanda. So from 1981 to 1989, the country heard of the Virgin Mary as never before. And Kibeho is located in the south of the country in one of the poorest regions of Rwanda. And down there was two dynamic priests that helped keep the Catholic religion alive. Alphonsine was the first seer of Kibeho, 17 years old in her first year of secondary school. So like maybe she's a freshman in high school. And she's always showed a great love for the Blessed Virgin Mary. Here's what she says about her first apparitions. It was on Saturday. I was in the dining room of the school, serving my classmates. I heard a voice calling me. She said, Mary said, my daughter, and Alphonsine said, here I am. So I went to the corridor and saw a very beautiful woman. I knelt down, made the sign of the cross, and asked, who are you? She said, I'm the mother of the world. So when the apparition ended, Alphonsine remained motionless for a quarter of an hour, as if she was paralyzed in ecstasy. Neither the teachers nor the nuns believed what Alphonsine said. They thought she was ill. Then on the next day, on November 29th, apparitions happened again. And then December, the apparitions took place almost every Saturday. Students and the teachers were testing her. They would burn her with a match or prick her with a pin, but she had no reactions. And she suffered a lot of abuse during this period of persecution. The students mocked her, saying, here comes the seer. During the May 8th apparition, Alphonsine complained to the Virgin Mary that people say we are crazy. So many signs are given by heaven to bring the students and the teachers to believe in the authenticity of the apparitions. So they brought a bunch of rosaries to have been blessed by the Virgin Mary, and they were all mixed up. So Alphonsine didn't know whose rosary was whose. And some rosaries became so heavy and she couldn't lift them and asked for blessing. And then notice that the heavy rosary belonged to a student who did not believe in the authenticity of the apparitions and who criticized her. Also in the dormitory, there was apparitions of a star and sparkling lights that all could see. Following apparitions took place in the evening in the dormitory in the room of the seer, and then eventually outside. And she would tell the seer about the date of her next apparition. And in January 12, 82, Our Lady grants the prayers of the students and appears to a young girl, Anathali, and will appear to her until December 1983. And to the surprise of all, Our Lady appears to Maria Claire. And everybody's amazed because she was one of those who had showed her unbelief. She also called Alphonsine a fool. And she was seized by the mysterious power. Mary chose Marie Claire to give her messages. And she told Maria Claire to tell the people, one must meditate on the passion of Jesus and on the deep sorrows of his mother. One must recite the rosary every day, and also the rosary of the 7 sorrows of Mary to obtain the favor of repentance. And she had apparitions until September 1982. Towards the end of the apparition, the Blessed Virgin asked the seers to bless the crowd. The seers in ecstasy, they don't see the crowd, but they see a garden of flowers, some fresh and others faded. And she asked the seers to water or bless the flowers, explaining that the fresh flowers represent people whose hearts are turned to God, whereas the faded flowers represent those whose hearts are turned to earthly things, especially to money. And here's a statue of the Divine Mercy. It's about like 10 feet tall or so. There's also mystical journeys. Alphonsine experienced this phenomena on March 20 and 21st in 1982. She tells the sister directress and her classmates, I will look dead, but don't be afraid. Don't bury me. The journey lasts 18 hours. Priests, nurses, religious, they can all see Alphonsine plunged into deep sleep, and her body is straight and very heavy laying on the ground. They can't lift her, nor can they separate her hands that are joined. And during that journey, Mary shows Alphonsine heaven, purgatory, and hell. The pilgrims in Kivioho witnessed several extraordinary phenomena, as like in other places, the dance of the sun from left to right, up and down, the disappearance of the sun replaced by a greenish moon, and so forth. But the greatest miracle was the wave of conversions and prayers that resulted from the apparitions. Mary especially called her consecrated ones in the youth, these poor young people of our times who go to schools that are not only without God, but against God, as the shrine. One of the key reasons that brought the belief to ecclesiastical authorities was that on August 19th, the seers saw a river of blood, people who were killing each other, abandoned corpses with no one to bury them, a tree all in flames, and bodies without heads. The prophecy seemed incredible, but about a decade later, in 1994, a civil war erupted in Rwanda, where one tribe was killing another tribe, and vice versa. And in 3 months, an estimated 500,000 to 1 million people were killed, many beheaded by machetes and dumped into the KG River, the river of blood. And Mary had also warned us that Kibeho, that sexual promiscuity would lead to disaster. And that's before the world knew about AIDS. But by 1994, Africa had 70% of the world's AIDS cases. And entire villages were turned into ghost towns. So far, 25 million Africans have contracted AIDS. Then we go to Syria, Our Lady of Sufadia. In November 1882, 3 women of different faiths, Orthodox, Catholicism, and Islam, stood around a sickbed praying for a neighbor of theirs in Damascus. Seeing light and oil coming from the Catholic woman's hands, the Muslim woman urged her to put them on the sick person, who was instantly healed. And this began the career of Myrna, a member of the Melkite Greek Catholic Church, who was 18, and she was recently married to Nicholas of the Antiochian Greek Orthodox Church. So the Melkite Greek Catholic Church is the one that's believes in the Pope and is subordinate to the Pope, whereas the Greek Orthodox have their own popes and do not recognize the Pope in Rome as the head of all the Orthodox churches, but they recognize him as the head of the Roman Church. 5 days later, oil began oozing from a small picture of Our Lady of Kazan in Myrna's home. And both Catholics and Orthodox Christians revere this icon, and it's known for miracles and healings. With a year's break in 85 and 86, the oil flowed from the image until 1990. In 1982, Myrna saw the Virgin coming from a globe of light in a eucalyptus tree. She repeatedly then saw and received messages from both Mary and Jesus until 1990, so 8 years, when she reported to the Virgin's farewell, "You are seeing me for the last time until the feast is unified." So it was for a call for Christian unity, including agreement on the date of Easter. And the Eastern churches, they wanted to celebrate Easter on the day after Passover, whatever it became during the week, whenever Passover fell, according to the Jewish calendar. Whereas in the West, we always celebrate Easter on Sunday. So the Orthodox could celebrate Easter on a Tuesday or Thursday or Monday. And so the Virgin repeated biblical sayings of Jesus: love one another, forbear and forgive, do not fear. And Myrna learned the affirmation, God saved me, Jesus enlightens me, the Holy Spirit is my life, thus I fear nothing. The Virgin also had promised Myrna that she would see her again in the years when the Catholics and Orthodox celebrate Easter together. which again happens very rarely because of the difference in the Jewish calendar and the liturgical calendars. Since '83, she has suffered intense stigmatic wounds to her ecstasy, and the people during the day could see them, but not at midnight, they're gone. And miracles have been attributed to the oil from her icon and her hands. And in both Catholic and Orthodox have celebrated masses in connection with the devotions. And annual anniversary celebrations begin November 26th with Mass in the church, followed by evening prayers and festivities in the Master's home. Then we go to Argentina with Mary of the Rosary of San Nicholas. So you remember San Nicholas, actually that was the same as Saint Nicholas, or the beginning where we got Santa Claus. Anyway, in 1983, the Virgin appears to Miss Gladys de Mota in her room when she prays the rosary. And she had baby Jesus in her arms and a rosary in her hand. And she made a gesture as to give the rosary to Gladys. The appearance was brief. She was a simple woman, wife of a worker and mother of 2 daughters. In the previous day, she did see that the rosary that hangs in her bedroom had glowed by itself, and also some of the neighbors saw it. So on the 13th of October, again, in commemoration of the last apparition on the 13th of October at Fatima, Mary spoke for the first time. "You have done well. Do not be afraid. Come to see me. I will take you by the hand and you will travel many paths." October 25th, Gladys goes for the second time since the apparition started to the city of Rosario. And that day, exactly a month to the day of the first apparition, she appears to her and gives her a white rosary and says, "Receive this rosary from my hands and keep it forever and ever." In November, the Virgin gives several messages to her where she reiterates her proximity, assistance, and protection. "When you need it, come to me. I will respond to you." In November, Mary's message reminded her that the parish of San Nicholas had been entrusted from the beginning to Our Lady of the Rosary. There was a statue that was venerated in the sanctuary, and it had been an outstanding place in the cathedral, which was inaugurated in 1984. There's a picture of the cathedral. And it was blessed by Pope Leo XIII, and it was brought from Rome to this place. So it was moved around and it got damaged. The hand was damaged and also the rosary was damaged. So they put it up in one of the bell towers until it could be repaired. So when Gladys explained that there was a statue there, Father Perez realized that the statue was up in the cathedral for a long time and now is stashed away in the bell tower. And as Gladys described it, he realized it was the same statue. And when they went up to the bell tower and saw the statue, Virgin Mary appeared and said, "They have forgotten me, but I have resurged. Place me there because you will see me as I am. Do not be ashamed. You will have me. I want to be at the shores of the Parana." Shores of Parana is a river that flows into one of the major rivers in around San Nicholas. And it's one of the few rivers in the world that doesn't make deltas or little islands at the end where all the silt gathers up. It goes pure into the lake that comes from the other major river that in that area. And like other rivers like the Mississippi, all around there's little islands and deltas and sandbars that appear from the silt flowing down the river. So it's more of like another miracle, Parana River. About 3 months after the first appearance, the ray of light illuminated the second time the place of the sanctuary. And do not forget the sanctuary, she says, since it will be the sanctuary of the Lord. Time will pass, but this will last. And the image was transferred to the new sanctuary in 1989. And I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Virgin also instructed Gladys to have a medal struck with the invocation of Mary of the Rosary St. Nicholas, and the reverse side of the Trinity with 7 stars. 7 stars represent the graces of that the wearer will receive it on from our Son Jesus Christ, who wears this medal. There's the sanctuary, the new sanctuary that holds, gosh, I don't know, 5,000, 8,000 people. It's huge. On November 1884, God allows Gladys to live the great torments of the Passion of our Lord. Again, she gets, like the others, she gets a stigmata on her hands during Thursdays and Fridays. And she gets it on her feet on Good Friday after 3 p.m. And every Good Friday, Gladys feels a special form, the pain of carrying a cross, and her shoulder is bruised with a noticeable and very painful spot. And she sometimes feels the sore on her side, on the right side, where Jesus was pierced by a spear. So then we go to Italy, Our Lady of Bel Paso. On May 1886, the Virgin appeared near the rock of Bellarello to a teenage boy named Rosario. And different signs had preceded the apparition. Rosario was in bed with a high fever, and a bright light appeared in his bedroom. A woman's voice invited Rosario to pray for sinners and not to despair about his illness. And he said, "Who's speaking?" She said, "I will tell you when the right time's come." And he was healed. And she said, "I am Mary, the Mother of God, the Immaculate Conception." She asked him to go to the Rock of Borello on Sunday, and there she would show himself. So he got there and he saw a small white cloud rapidly approaching the rock. The cloud expanded and folded like a flower and radiated a strong light. Shortly after, he saw a sweet-looking lady dressed in white with a white cloak and a head encircled with gold. He had many apparitions, 32 apparitions, and the last one took place on May 1st, 1988. And she promised him a 33rd vision for an unspecified future date. And the messages that he received are similar to the one from Fatima, including the Blessed Virgin holding out her hands to cause the ground to open up, allowing him to see a vision of the abyss of hell, allowing him to see hell. So he was given 12 secrets. 2 of them are about himself, and 10 secrets are about mankind. And although we don't know what the secrets are, the words used by the Blessed Virgin leave no room for doubt. They're like, especially in unpleasant events, most serious chastisements, and purification. And on May, the Archbishop blessed the statue of Our Lady of El Paso and approved the chapel built. Then we go to Egypt, Our Lady of Shubra. The Holy Virgin Mary started her apparitions in the Church of Saint Damiana, the martyr, in Cairo, Egypt. Damiana was the daughter of a high official in the early church, like the 200s or 300s, when there was a lot of persecution of Christians. And her father knew she was a Christian, and the emperor called her father to go and sacrifice to the pagan gods, which he did. When he came back and told Damiana what happened, she chastised him and said, "How could you pray to a fake god?" And so he went back and professed his faith, and he was killed. So when they found out the daughter was Christian, they grabbed her and they tried to get her to make sacrifices to the pagan idols, and she didn't. And they tortured her and then threw her in jail. And the next day, when she appeared before everybody, everything was healed. This caused a lot of people to believe. So this went on for 7 days, and they finally cut off her head. But there were lots and lots and lots of people that were brought to the Christian faith because of what they saw. that Deimiana was healed. Anyway, Our Lady appeared beside the two towers of the church and was first seen by people living in houses, for the light was so bright it was going in their houses. And it repeated several times, and people from all sects and religions came to see the apparitions. Obviously, there's a lot of Muslims and Orthodox people in there, probably very few Catholics. And the streets were narrow and they became overcrowded with thousands of people during the night vigils. And they would sing and like all night. So the mother of Teresa, who was 6 years old, that Teresa had lost the vision in her right eye after a tricot needle pierced her eye, caused a huge cataract. Tricot needle is used to sew stretchy materials like swimming suits. And the girl was unable to see using this eye. In December, the child was operated on to remove the cataract, but the eye condition continued to deteriorate and it was infected. So on Sunday, she took her daughter. We went to St. Deimiana and received communion. We attended the church balcony, ascended to the balcony and stood there with a crowd. Suddenly a strong light shone from the right side of the altar. And her daughter says, "I can see, mother, I can see." So then we go to Slovakia, Our Lady of Untainted Purity. And this is about two young girls, Katka and Ivetka. And they said that they went up the hillside and also with Nukusla Seleska. And about 7 o'clock. And they played all games and they made some bacon and sang. And they should have gone back down the hill to church at 5 p.m., but they didn't want to go home. So they stayed up in the hill a little longer. But then the storm came and there was lightning and winds and the wind was blowing and they went into a little hut and they were afraid. So they prayed and they said they were sorry for their sins. And they pledged that during the week they would go to church every day. And our fear left and we were sitting on the bed in the little hut. And then we saw the Blessed Mother. And she sat on the bench and she was listening to us. And they both said that I see her. At this moment, they ran out of the room and they didn't even lock the door. They ran home. So after several apparitions, the people began to believe, and they had a consecration of a newly built cross in its place. And like at Fatima and at Betania and other in Medjugorje, after the prayer of the Rosary, the sun had peculiar supernatural phenomena. And the sun, they could look at the sun during the day, which is almost impossible for people to do or shouldn't. It was rotating, emitting concentric circles in various colors and changing position. A ring of satellite suns was created around the main. And 2,000 to 3,000 people saw these, including local priests and the mayor. In 1999, another revelation was offered. 5,000 people were making the pilgrimage. And Mary said, "I bless the entire mountain." And Mary told the children many things to tell the people. God's visit is already close and therefore search for love. I want to live in you and you in me. Learn to thank. I did all my life what God wants. And on August 6th, 1995, the last apparition, Mary stated, "For this time, you need to repent. Please, please, you need to be more vigilant and simple. There's time coming which is already here. You must have faith as a child and accept God's will for you." And then she said to Ivetka to touch my feet. So Ivetka leaned over and kissed the foot of the Blessed Virgin Mary. And all this was filmed. Then we have Iraq in 1991, Mosul. And Mosul is close to the ruins of the ancient city of Nineveh, where Jonah issued his warning that in 10 days or so, something like that, that the city would be destroyed. Also, it was from the book of Job, where he lived during the exile, and he lived in Nineveh. And the apparitions began on the Feast of Assumption in 1991 to 14-year-old Dina Basher. And also she saw our Lord came to her in a bright light, blinding her for several days. There was also a stigmata, and in Baghdad, 3 bishops saw the blood flow from Dina. At first, the oil came out of Dina's skin, and then a voice told her that someday the blood will come out. The girl also saw Jesus with a golden crown and shining white robe, or with white rays around his head. The patriarch issued a decree referring to the happenings as astounding miracles and wonders, and the bishop of Baghdad saw that what had been occurring to Dina and said it was a manifestation of God's living power. Here is what Mosul looked like after the ISIS war and the civil wars, where everything was being bombed. You see the little green top of the church where the church had been destroyed. I think it's been built back now. And it was a mess before all this happened. There were many spontaneous healings, and cures occurred in the Church of the Blessed Virgin in Baghdad with church officials present. We go to Nigeria, Eok Bay. She appeared to 12-year-old girl Christina Agbo in Eok Bay, located in a small village in a remote area of Nigeria. And while Christina was intent on collecting herbs, she saw a beautiful woman floating in the sky. And she looked and smiled without saying a word. And she had a rosary. And the first message was, I am the refuge of sinners. I come from heaven to gain souls to Christ and to shelter my children in my immaculate heart. What I want from you is to pray for the souls in purgatory, for the world, and to console Jesus. Our Lady told Christina that August 4th would become a special feast, and that day she received a Eucharistic miracle. And she did receive Holy Communion from an angel. So Father Samuel of the parish made sure there were 2 photographers present. One was Father Emmanuel, the bishop's representative, and the other was a commercial photographer. And what Christina saw was the angel coming close to her with a large host, and the host got smaller and smaller until when it was about the regular size, it was on her tongue. And this is the picture of her receiving the host. Biggest miracle was of the sun occurred on November 21st. And I had a video of this. You can go online and catch this video from Aok Bay, where you see the sun moving around and people yelling and praying, and Mary appears in the sun. And what was in March, Mary calls for the recitation of the rosary, saying, those are my children who pray the rosary frequently and with commitment will receive many graces, and I know Satan will not be able to approach them. My children, when you are assailed by great temptations and problems, take your rosary to me and your problems will be solved. Every time you say, Hail Mary, full of grace, you receive many graces from me. Those who recite the rosary will never be damned. Also, Mary gave Christina the power to speak in English, just boom, and she could speak perfect English. And that's what she could use to speak to all the pilgrims who would travel from different parts of Nigeria to Aok Bay. So, wanting to devote herself totally to God, she decided to become a Carmelite nun, taking the name of Christina Maria Lamina. That's it. Thank you for everything. Have a blessed week.